Welcome to a Season of Caring podcast where there's hope for living, loving, and caring with no regrets. This is Rayna Neises, your host, and today we have a special guest, Karen Hafner. Karen is married to Rance, and they've been married for 28 years. They live in Winter Haven, Florida, and have 2 daughters, as well as a son-in-law and grandchildren, hopefully on the way. She has been a dental hygienist, but is currently working on her certification in life coaching. She desires to work with women who are raising families. She absolutely loves family and friends and fashion, entertaining, decorating, and deep conversation, mixed with laughter and serving others through life coaching. She's looking forward to planning events and holiday gatherings and, of course, shopping. Her faith is very important to her and is the center of all that she does with her time and talents. Thank you so much, Karen, for being with us today.
Thank you, Rain. I'm looking forward to it.
So start off and just share with our listeners a little bit about your caring season.
Well, it was a privilege to care for my father. My dad passed away. It's been 1 year and a couple of days since his passing. We, as a family, had decided that we would do our best to care for my dad at home. And we are so grateful that that's the way it worked out for him. My dad had always been a very healthy person, and he declined pretty quickly in probably the last month of his life. One really neat thing that happened during this time, I have a sister who was estranged from our family for several years, and she wanted to come back and spend some time with my dad. So a couple years before my dad began his very swift decline, she asked if she could move in and spend 2 or 3 months really just redeeming some time with Dad. And he said yes. He was concerned because she wasn't going to be working, just be at his house. And it turned out to be a beautiful thing where, as my sister would say, it's just like a relationship with the Lord. My dad received her back with full forgiveness from being from the family, and she was able to care and love for him in his winter of life. They grew very close in the last couple months of his life. I was working part-time, but I needed to spend full-time care with him, with my sister. We didn't know how long, of course, he had, but it was a sweet time for all of our family to be able to be with my dad, take him to his appointments, kind of intercept some of those challenges with healthcare and appointments and miscommunication and things like that. So we have really great memories of the last couple months of his swift decline because he was so happy that he was at his home and that it was his family that was there around him caring for him.
That's an amazing story. So many times when we face a parent passing, there can be a lot of strain on relationships. So it's really neat to hear that it was actually a restoration period for your sister and you, and that you were able to work well together. But I think that can be a real roadblock, especially when there's history of struggles.
Yeah, I think my dad was anticipating there to be challenges, and he kept waiting for it, and all he kept receiving was love from my sister, and she is a lovely person anyway, but she really needed, and my dad didn't realize the need he had for his baby to come back and be there for him. And so, yeah, we are just so thankful for that. And it's such a picture of how our Father receives us and forgives us when we come and simply just say, I am sorry.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I know for my season of caring for my dad, I have one sister, and we really grew closer together because we had that common mission. We had that common thing, Dad's best interest. What are we going to do? How are we going to take care of Dad? And making those decisions. Because my dad had Alzheimer's, he couldn't make decisions for himself. So we really had to be in that role together and come into agreement of this is the best thing for him. But I was so thankful that we as well, it brought us together But I know so many times that's not the story that I hear. So that's amazing. I love to hear that having her to be a part of not only caring, but just being able to help you with the decisions and all the things that have to happen.
Oh, yes, yes. It's funny, my sister has not ever had children. I have two daughters, and I think it's funny. I don't know if your listeners will relate with this, but I think sometimes the way we parent our kids comes out in how we care for our parents in the last days. We didn't fuss, my sister and I, or fight, but it was interesting how we did things differently. And I could see so many things I did with my dad and some of her question marks, same as my husband, when your husband and wife parenting the children. So we got some laughs out of that. I was like, yeah, I think I'm parenting right now.
I agree. And
Yeah.
I have stepchildren, but I don't have children of my own. My sister has two, and I agree. I saw the same types of things. And one of the things that we talk about today is even the fact that it worked because we let each other do what we needed to do for comfort for ourselves. Not always, I mean, it was always in the best interest of my dad, but sometimes they're just
Sure.
things you need for your own sanity, right? And so you do them your way, and she did them her way. That's part of the give and take, and the area of growth in those relationships is letting each other be who you are and using those strengths versus working against each other.
Yeah, very, very true. I think that's why, just in pursuing my life coaching certification, it's kind of a family joke. I've always been a questioner. I love people and I love to ask questions. And my sister always depended on me to go to the doctor appointment. She's like, you're going to ask a million more questions than I am, and you're going to get all the answers, and they're going to tell you when I won't know what to ask. So we would, again, like you're saying, we kind of work off our strengths, and I'll do this and you do that. But I'm definitely going to be going and asking a bunch of questions.
That's great. That's a perfect example of those strengths and weaknesses. So what would you say was your biggest blessing in this season of caring for your dad?
Blessing. Yeah. I think just we were able to embrace the time and realize that at 89 years old, his days were coming to an end, and we were able to embrace it as a family, spend as much time having family gatherings. He's a big baseball fan, watching baseball, big baseball fan. Our little league organization in my dad's hometown has a big group of kids. And it was actually just a couple months before he passed, they asked him to throw out the first pitch at the Little League opening ceremonies, and he really wasn't sure he could do it. He was somewhat concerned with even just being able to stand up from his wheelchair and do it, but he did it, and it was such a wonderful thing to see. And yeah, that was a big blessing for all of us.
That's neat. My dad was a baseball player as well. So we spent a lot of time watching the Royals and talking about that stuff whenever we spent time together as well. So it's great to be able to enter into those things that they love and celebrate them with them.
Yes, for sure.
What would be some of the unanticipated challenges that you faced in your caring season?
Probably the most change my attitude of what I expected from others, because I did not want to be angry. I didn't want to be frustrated. I didn't want to be disappointed and use up all those negative emotions during a time when I realized the days were drawing nigh that he would leave us. And sometimes, even unintentionally, I think we can have expectations from doctors, from family members, people that we love that are close by. And they, as we know through grief, they don't always see things the same way. They don't do things the same way. And I had to try and just tell myself, I am here. I am grateful. I'm able to be available and do what I need to do to love him and be at peace with that and not worry what anyone else is doing. There was nobody doing anything that was really wrong or anything like that, but I could see it becoming a mental obstacle that was frustrating me. And my husband saw it, and I thought, we all love each other, and everyone is showing their love in different ways. And I needed to just really focus on me and my love for my dad and what I could do.
Wise words. As caregivers, there's a lot of emotion that's involved in it. And I think you've nailed a lot of what we feel, that guilt, that frustration. And oftentimes it comes from expectations. And realizing that those expectations are what's causing us to feel that way can really help when we identify what's the expectation. Why am I feeling this way? I often
Yeah.
had a coaching session with myself on my drive home with that 220-mile time. I would be asking myself, how did the weekend go? What went well? What didn't go well? How are you feeling? Just really checking in with myself, because
Yeah.
I needed to do that in order to decompress, let it go, and be ready to re-engage in home with my husband and stepsons and all that kind of stuff. And so
Sure.
important to do that, but it's a learned thing. Oftentimes we're just so busy when we're caregiving, we don't take the time to stop and ask ourselves those questions and really get to the bottom of the feelings that we're having. So that's a great thing to share with our listeners, asking them just to stop and think about it, what it is that's causing the frustration and the anger.
Well, many times in coaching, we say awareness is curative. And I think that's what you're sharing as well. Let me just try and be aware of what is going on in my heart and mind and process it out and do something constructive and positive with it.
Sometimes we can do something about it. Sometimes we can't do something about it. For example, you knew that he was 89 and what was happening was he was reaching the end of his life. So many times we want to do more, make that not happen. And that feeling can be really hard to get to the place where you just kind of open hand it and go, okay, he's had a good life. We're doing everything we can, and it's time to let go.
Right.
And that's where sometimes is a great time with hospice coming in to try to help with some of those. Tell us a little bit about your hospice experience.
I had always heard wonderful things about a hospice, and I think it can be a wonderful experience. We were blessed that it was very wonderful. I grieve because even since my dad's passed, we've had some family members that haven't had a great experience, and I know that's really tough. One of the, maybe I could say, challenges or disappointments I had to work through, and I was able to do it a little bit better because my daughter's a pediatric ICU nurse, and she kind of coached me through a situation that happened. When we got to probably the last 48, 72 hours, my dad was he was very agitated in his bed, shifting and moving and just agitated. I had asked my dad because of the agitation, would you like something for that? Do you want us to help you? He knew exactly what we were talking about, even though his eyes were not open and he wasn't looking at me. He said, no, too soon. Well, the next day he was very irritated, agitated in his bed. And I said, do you need some help? And he said, yes, I need something. Well, I don't want to use the word pride myself. I always like that I try to turn every stone over and think through everything. And I was so keenly aware of thinking, I'm going to think through, I'm going to ask every question so I'm prepared and aware. Well, I asked the hospice nurse, I said, what do you think? She said, yes, we'll give him the most minuscule amount of morphine just to relax him. And then you'll be able to enjoy it more because it's hard to watch him like this. Well, never occurred to me that that tiny little dose would cause him to never wake up again. And I did not know that. And so he became relaxed. Well, by that evening, all my family was there, all my siblings, everyone. We had a wonderful hospice nurse there. And she said, well, he's really ready for his next dose. Would you like us to go ahead? I said, oh, no. We're here waiting. We want him to wake up. And she looked at me and said, yeah, he's not going to wake up. And I was so shocked. And it's not that anyone did anything wrong. There's no crystal ball that you can determine these things. I guess, but it never occurred to me that that could happen. And we were all like, what? We're not going to get to talk to him. So that was hard. And my daughter helped me through it, saying, Mom, if you had known that he was not potentially going to wake up, would you have done anything differently? He wanted some help. He wanted medicine. So that really helped me think, yes, like you said earlier, I was doing what was best for him. He asked for it. He needed it. And it was us that was suffering with our expectations. But I thought you can't always know, you can't always think through it all. And so, for any of your listeners that may be going through some of those painful questions of why did I do this or why didn't I? You're loving your family member or your loved one the best you can. And there's so much going on, so much emotion. I just say, give yourself grace and just know that your loved one knew they were being loved and cared for.
I want to echo that. That's just beautiful, because so many times when we are reaching the end, we just don't know what to expect. And we can oftentimes struggle with the decisions that we had to make and the position that we had to be in. I was 28 when I lost my mom, but one of the things that was a challenge for me as I look back on it was those types of things. What options do we have? What medications are available? I just didn't know enough to ask those questions. So
Right.
when I went through it much later with my dad actually died 20 years after my mom's passing. I knew a lot more and I was a lot more able to ask those questions and get a better understanding. But there's still things because of our emotions that we look back on and we might question. And so I love that encouragement. We have to give ourselves grace, and we have to know that we've done the best that we can. And our loved one knows that. Like you said, they know
Yes,
that we
they
love
do.
them, and they know that we're
Yeah.
here to support them and to do whatever we can to make them as comfortable as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I think one of the things too is there's never a time to have a final goodbye. None of it is good enough. That would be one of the things I think as we look back, we think, I didn't really get to say goodbye. But at the same time we did. I mean, I did to him, but I didn't get to hear it from him, back and forth. Like you said, that conversation.
Right.
We don't know when our final conversation is going to be. And so it's hard because we want to know, we want to be able to make it this special thing that happens, but often, most of the time, it is really just one last conversation. It's not one that we get. And having Alzheimer's, those conversations were few and far between anyway, as far as really coherent conversations. But one of the things that brought me comfort was, as we were there at his bedside as he was passing, he knew my sister had one hand and I had the other because he was just holding on. He would squeeze. We knew that he knew we were there. Those little things can be really encouraging when we look back on. So I didn't get to hear the "I love you, Rayna" or anything like that, but I did get the squeeze that made me know that he knew we were there with him.
Encouraging for you and comforting for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the road of caregiving is sometimes long, sometimes not. Always hard in some ways, but always filled with blessing. Karen, as we wrap up, what would be one thing you could offer our listeners today that maybe you haven't said yet?
I try not to look back at the situation and have regrets. It's so easy for something to pop in your head and go, oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I could have, should have, would have. And I just refuse to do that. And I would encourage others, just accept where you are, because we always hear 2020 hindsight. It's so easy after you've had time pass, you're rested now, the emotions aren't running high, to think differently. But your heart was in it and you did the best you could with the information you had, and your loved one knows that, and they would not want you second guessing and beating yourself up and regretting. They're not in pain anymore. And remember the blessing of just being able to be by their side and, like you said, squeeze their hand, whisper in their ear. We know they hear us even when they're not responding, and know that we just showed as much love as we could and as much care as we could.
That's beautiful, Karen. Thank you for those words of encouragement. And listeners, it is important to realize that this journey of caregiving does come to an end. And sometimes we are busily engaging in doing, and we forget that our goal is actually to walk our family member all the way home. And then my goal for you as well, caregiver, is to then have a life to walk back into. So that means that you have to care for yourself while you're caring for them, so that the life that you have right now, you will have even once your loved one's gone. So just encourage you to think about life after and be sure that you have the life that you want, even once you walk them all the way home. You can find Karen on Facebook at Karen Hafner Lifestyle Coaching and engage with her and have more opportunities to gain some wisdom and encouragement as you're walking throughout life, caring for children or loved ones or parents, whoever it is. She has a heart to support you as well, that you can reach out there.
Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to a Season in Caring podcast. And just a reminder, this podcast is created for the encouragement of family caregivers. And if you have medical, financial, or legal questions, please contact your local professionals and take heart in your season of caring.